Hold on one second, though. Trucks are still going by. Hold on. Apologies. Okay, now I'm ready to start. Okay, so welcome everybody to the Q&A for the Resistance of Vision Selects program. Resistance of Vision is a touring festival presented by the 27-year-old San Francisco Indie Fest, and it premiered on May Day weekend in 2025 and has in-person screenings in Boston, in Birmingham, in Wichita, and at the Roxy in San Francisco as part of DocFest. These films will be available for booking for groups seeking to hold spaces for dialogue, organizing, and action in their communities. Partnerships with national organizations will support each of these programs to assist with resources, audience building, and calls to action. So we have right now 4 programs for the 2025-2026 festival. Our Bodies, Our Choice on gender justice. This is an emergency on environmental justice. Fight the Power, racial justice. Which side are you on? Labor and housing justice. And then soon to be announced, From the River to the Sea, a program about Palestine, those fighting to end the occupation, apartheid, and genocide, both inside and outside of Palestine. So I want to welcome all of our filmmakers today. Thanks for joining us for this virtual Q&A that will be packaged with the virtual festival program. And so I want to invite you all to introduce yourselves, to tell us about yourself as a human, as a citizen, and as a filmmaker. And I will start by passing it to Susan O'Brien.
Perfect. My name is Susan, and I'm a filmmaker, a creative director, a dancer. I always say an everything artist. I have 2 films in the festival. One of them is Resist, the Resistance Revival Chorus, and the other one is When We Arrive as Flowers. Resist was a film that I did over a period of 2.5 years following the Resistance Revival Chorus movement, which is a group of chorus singers that are working very, very hard to enact change through the power of song. And then When We Arrive as Flowers is a collaborative piece that I did with one of my friends who is an amazing, talented dancer, about her trans journey in coming into her own identity. And that shows the symbolic journey that she went on through flowers and through transformation and beauty, and joy. So that is me. I will pass it to Steve.
Hi, I am Steve Mang, one of the co-directors of Local One, which is a short film that follows up on the feature documentary Union that I co-directed with Brett Story. And so Local One picks up 2.5 years after the Amazon Labor Union's historic win in Staten Island, and follows the Amazon Labor Union as they wage an organized strike that sets off a series of strikes across the nation. I really hope people watch this film and feel it serves as like a reminder of the energy and the power of working class movements right now, at a moment when institutions like the NLRB that are aimed at protecting labor organizing are under political attack. And we just see this as a real call to action, that the supporting working class organizers is something that impacts all of us at a moment when all workers across all sectors are really being hurt. So so grateful to be here and be in conversation with you all.
And I'll pass it to Lipa Hussein.
Hi everyone, my name is Levi Hussein. I'm from Scotland, UK, so it's about 5:15 p.m. here at the moment. I am the writer and director of a short film, an experimental documentary called Roll Down the Window, which is a exploration of me interrogating a condition called Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Which is a neurological condition in which I have been impacted by since I was a child. And the film follows the condition, but also a social commentary on racial and religious issues pertaining to being Muslim in the UK, being Muslim in the West, and the sort of struggles that I have encountered throughout the years, both from a social and political point of view. And the film is also an interrogation about female violence and rage and whether that is permitted to certain people or not. And the film also weaves in different mediums. So we have, live action, but we also have animation depicting the condition. It's a bit of a bonkers film, but it definitely we have aimed to try and bring the idea of Alice in Wonderland to audiences, but also with the running theme of, social and political commentary on issues of the moment. But yeah, that's me. I will pass it on to Molly-Anna.
Hi, this is Molly. I'm also in the UK right now in London. I'm the director of Nomads in the City. So this is a documentary about squatting in London, to be precise, but it could probably be applied on a global level. Nomads in the City follows the process of squatting houses from the perspective of three different people, and goes through all the process of how I open a building, the emotional aspects of it, and what it's like to live in this semi-nomadic, semi-state of homelessness. Sorry, I've lost my track. So yeah, it's supposed to run on two different areas. Both the housing epidemic we're going through right now, that nobody can afford housing, no one can find a house. And also I felt it was important to talk about this from the angle of femmes and queers, because I feel like that is a often overlooked perspective. Often when you think about squatting, you think about male violence, drugs kind of area, which obviously is there, but I wanted to talk more from my own personal perspective. Yeah, I think that's about it. Sorry, I got really lost.
All right, and we'll pass it on to Sonia.
Hi, I'm Sonia Kennebeck. I'm a filmmaker and journalist, and I co-directed and co-produced a short film called Danielle Scott Ancestral Call with Tatiana Anderson. And our film is about artist Danielle Scott. She's a legally blind, multiracial, mixed media artist. And as part of her body of work, Ancestral Call, she exposes herself to the intergenerational trauma of the Atlantic slave trade. So our film is about ancestry, it's about history. She's also an educator, and Tatiana can share more.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tatiana Anderson, and Sonia is my business partner. We run a production company called Starfields Media, and we really focus on authentic storytelling for commercial or artistic purposes. And I mention that because the way we found Danielle's story is extremely authentic. Sonia, who is in New York, was going out on a Saturday with a couple of friends, or wasn't a Saturday, it was a weekend, and somebody wanted to go see this art exhibit. Nobody knew what it was, so they made their way to this art exhibit, and it was Danielle's. And Sonia was so consumed by her work, which is really multi-layered, because she works in resins, in collage, in painting. She kept texting me all these pictures from the art gallery, and it was like, this woman is amazing. We should do something with her. So it's just funny that, our focus in authentic storytelling is really how we came in contact with Danielle. And we're just so excited to share this short film with the world, which was commissioned by PBS for its American Masters series and funded by Firelight Media.
Excellent. And I'll pass it on to Kimmy Tong.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm in Mauritius, so it's 8 p.m. Right now. So I grew up close to the ocean, close to the coral reef on this small island. So I just feel really, I don't know, I feel like really connected and just really hurt by the state of the world right now, especially when it comes to biodiversity loss. We're currently going through like the worst coral bleaching I've ever witnessed. Like it's just depressing to go snorkeling. And so I'm an artist and a director. The film I'm having in the festival is called Pieds dans l'eau. In English, it's called Black Tide. So it's an animated short documentary about an oil spill we had in Mauritius in 2020. And it's basically due to bad government response, networks of corruption. Basically, the oil spill was just handled horribly. It was this Japanese oil tanker that landed there in really suspicious conditions. And it was basically in the middle of COVID, so we were kind of like secluded, so no one could travel off the island. It's basically the civil population who had to intervene and take the situation in their hands. And so what I found really metaphorically strong in this kind of national event, because it mobilized the whole population, the economy, everyone who wasn't working at the time as well, is really a metaphor for what is necessary to, I would say, counter climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, because I feel like it's really the sum of individual actions that make a collective. These problems are collective problems, and none of them, and they're way too big for any of us to be able to do anything about them on our own. And so the film is made of real voices, documentary voices that are recorded from fishermen, skippers, that all like ocean people, basically. So it was really about this bond between the world we inhabit and us, and how this, and all the images are hand-drawn because I'm a painter and an artist initially. So I think the aim for the film, and it's kind of finding its way, is really to raise awareness and spark conversations about just how we cohabit with the other living entities that are around us, and the amount of space we need to leave to life around us, basically. So that's what my work's about, and that's what this film is about.
And then Chen Xingyap, I think you're the last filmmaker to share about your film.
Hi, I'm Chen Xingyap. I'm a Toronto-based director and editor. I used to cut nonfiction television in Singapore for a while, for a couple of years before I moved to Canada. I now make films, both documentary and narrative films, usually short films about mental health and the environment. So, Feeling the Apocalypse is my short film in the festival. It's an animated short documentary about how to deal with your emotions when you're staring down the barrel of civilizational and ecosystem collapse. So I guess I kind of market the film as a film about climate anxiety, but it really is more about, truthfully, the film is about an anxiety about everything that's going on, not just climate change. I knew about climate change in this abstract, removed abstract and removed way when I was growing up, but during the pandemic, I started learning about how it hooked into all these other consequences and developing crises. So overshoot, peak oil, microplastics, wet bulb temperatures, that kind of stuff. I grew up in kind of this bubble, and so I didn't that kind of stuff didn't really obvious to me. And I had to seek it out, and once I did, I had trouble sleeping, and the WhatsApp messages that my dad was sending me from Singapore, where he was telling me, "Oh, it's getting hotter. It's getting hotter this year. It's hotter every year, actually." And that kind of stuff started to really like set me off. So I made this. So this film is about how to process those emotions, how to process what your future looks like now with that information of what's likely to come. And it's not narrated by me because I wasn't really ready to deal with my emotions directly at the time. But I found a psychotherapist, Anderson Todd, who's also an educator. He researches cognitive science, Buddhist psychology, that kind of stuff, and he was perfect to sort of. I just recorded 2 hours of an interview with him, and I had animation put over it, and now it's a film about that I think makes people feel better about the climate situation without denying the facts.
Thank you. I wanted to give you all an opportunity to talk about the collaborations on your film. And I wanted to start with Tatiana and Sonia because those are so obvious, the musician that you have in the film, and of course, Danielle Scott, who's also an artist, and sort of anything that you want to share about the collaborative process of making that film and other folks that sort of contributed to it.
Tatiana, you want to start? Okay, so Danielle Scott, the artist, she works very collaboratively. So she works with her kids, for example. So part of the film was showing her collaboration with 2 of her children. And then another piece of work, she was collaborating with a musician who actually then during the interview, which we staged, like we created this stage where all of our participants were sitting in together. The musician was performing part of the score live during the interview recording. So everything we did on this film creatively was pretty high risk because we really only had one chance to get it right, and fortunately it worked out. And then within our team collaborations, and Tatiana can maybe talk more about that, but we have a wonderful cinematographer, director of photography, Jui Peng, and then our editor Maxine Gödecke, who we involved really from the start. And a lot of our creative visual ideas actually came from our editor. Like she had the idea to use projections and staging. So it really was a collaborative team effort.
Yeah, on the collaborative note, just the team itself is very multi-layered, sort of like Danielle's work, which is very authentic and organic. If I can get back to the part about authenticity, you see who Sonia and I are. We have somebody living with a disability on our production team, all races, all genders. So we're proud of that aspect and the fact that it actually does reflect the artist herself. But you can really expect Danielle to be a household name because it's through her layered artwork and this collaborative process that our film really gives, I think, hope that, preserving the memory of something like the trauma caused by the transatlantic slave trade can really help not only help us recognize, but heal our future as we move forward. One interesting thing as well, when we're talking about the organic nature of this and authenticity, the composer, Janetza Maria Miranda, who Sonia mentioned, actually met Danielle in Africa quite by accident. So, she composed this work, some of it before she even met Danielle, and it fits so perfectly into this. So for us, everything just came together, and again, we're really pleased to share her story and her work.
Yeah, and the film is just so visually rich. I mean, you really, it's like this tapestry, and you just feel, you know, the contributions of everyone that you have on screen, and then the folks that are sort of working on your team. It's such a stunning film. I'm so glad I got to see it on the big screen, and I hope for you who are watching this virtually that you'll have a chance to see it on the big screen at some point too. So Susan, do you want to talk about the collaborations for your films?
Yeah, sure. So similar story actually to you, Sonia, with how I found the Resistance Revival Chorus and how you found Danielle. Is I was doing a short film for Bust Magazine for their 25th anniversary, and they had a concert celebration, and the Resistance Revival Chorus was performing. And I just immediately was blown away by not only like how amazing their voices sounded together and how visceral it was and what it made me feel and how it just changed the whole energy of the crowd, but like visually looking at them all in their whites, all different, you know, races, ethnicities, ages, just coming together. Especially it was right after 2016. I think it was like in 2017. And I was really looking to be a part of the movement somehow, and work to getting these amazing, incredible people to have their voices heard in a impactful way, and share their story with the rest of the world. And basically, I, you know, went up to them and I was like, "Hi, you don't know me. I want to make a film on you. And I also want to sing with you because you are so cool." And basically from there, it turned into, like I said earlier, 2.5 years of following the movement through multiple other movements and doing research and finding that it wasn't just this New York City chorus, but it was other chapters throughout the country. So we went to San Diego, we went to Riverside, California, and we went to Atlanta right before COVID broke, literally like a month before the world shut down. And the collaboration with them was just so nurturing and soul healing during a time where we just all wanted to cry together and support one another. And hearing just the same songs that the New York City chorus was singing across the country, but in a different way. And also San Diego tends to sing in Spanish for their chorus. And it just was this beautiful connective tissue across the country. And it was very important for me throughout the whole editing process to work with the choir and to make sure that we were accurately representing their story. And we tie in the power of music into different movements that have happened throughout the country throughout the past, you know, hundreds of years. And we really wanted to dive into that. And so spoke to some of the educators that are part of the chorus that really, really helped us out. And then with When We Arrive as Flowers, I went to school with Diavana, and we both are dancers, and we always wanted to collaborate with one another. And we were at a cookout, and we looked at one another and we're like, now is the time. now is the time to actually do something with one another. And it kind of just started out as this little concept of doing a dance film, and then it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And it really is like a direct collaboration with her in showcasing her story and showcasing her transformation. And we loved just the idea of using the power of nature and how nature is so transformative and how nature has all of these different cycles, and showing her own journey into identity through that, and really focusing on a trans story that centers around joy and beauty and feels like an art piece in itself. So that is that.
It's a really stunning film.
Thank you.
Stephen, do you want to talk about collaborating with Brett Story and the other folks who worked on the film?
Sure. So, I feel like for a labor film, there are pretty important themes that kind of cross over into the making of a project like this. Like the biggest thing, labor organizers talk about is this idea that we can't make things alone, and we always achieve the most important things together. And I think that that's a very true sentiment for filmmaking. We had a highly collaborative team. Brett and I were very lucky to have Martin DeCicco as our co-DP, and he spent a tremendous amount of time with me filming on the ground in Staten Island. And I would say the most interesting thing about Local One was that it's a short film that the participants really were asking us to make, in a sense, and not that specific film, but after having spent 4 years with them, and really growing to trust our team, and really turning to us to confide in, some of the most delicate and important moments of their organizing trajectory. After we were done making Union, there's this kind of like moment where your absence creates a vacuum, right? And the organizers were very much wondering, like, what would we do next? How could we follow up? Would there be any follow-up? Because, in some ways, the end of our film only marked the very beginning of like a whole other set of challenges and projects that they were going to be working on. So it's a really interesting and maybe not for this conversation, but like a very complicated relationship. Like, how do we gauge and track and honor this trust that people, individuals, but then like organizations start to put in us as filmmakers? And yet, as filmmakers, we don't have the kind of like unlimited time and resource to become their personal videographers in perpetuity. And so I think like trying to kind of like find the right ways that honor and platform their really, incredible efforts has been something that I'm glad our entire team, we have these tremendous producers, Mars Verone and Samantha Curley, who have done such an incredible job, also bringing thoughtfulness and care to this idea of like, our impact. To be a lot is said often about like impact campaigns, and I think they're just so different with every production. And so, like, I'm grateful that, we have a really wonderful team that cares deeply about, oh, I lost you. Other way. Just making sure that like, we make films to give them back to the world, and that this is a film that we are giving back in the right way. And, the fact that like we are all living through a real distribution crisis is actually has a wonderful silver lining, that like we're all now re-empowered to kind of like define every aspect of like how the film is seen and who gets to see it and who gets to receive it in what ways. And so that's yeah, that's all just an attribute to kind of like feeling very lucky to have a wonderful team of collaborators that all bring something different to the project.
And I love how the narrative part of the film kind of ends with somebody carrying a pizza, I think, to other organizers, and this idea that like, the community taking care of each other, right? And that continues. And I thought it was a really, as a union organizer myself, a beautiful way to kind of end the film. So
I love that you picked up on how important the pizza is. Oh my gosh.
right?
You're the
It's
first
so
person who
important.
mentioned that. I was like, oh, is anybody going to get that? Thank you.
Yeah, I love that's like this stark, background. Like I don't know where she is. It's industrial, and she's just walking with the pizza to feed people.
I mean, it's the same exact site that Union takes place in,
Yeah,
the right adjacent to the bus stop.
yeah.
A lot of pizza was eaten on that campaign.
So Kim, do you want to talk about the animation and collaboration with all the folks that you interviewed, the community members?
Yeah, I mean, the paradox, I think, in making this film, it's all about community. So, but it was both about a lot of collaboration, but also a lot of loneliness. So I feel like the process of making the film was really a bit of both. So definitely it started with my boyfriend back then. We spent like 2, 3 weeks in the region that got impacted, and we met about around like 15 people, and that was amazing just to discover also the life of the fishermen, to interview them, to go with them on the reef, to spend this time in these communities, which Mauritius is a post-colonial island, so obviously society, and I think the film is a lot as well about that, is about a very divided post-colonial society coming together. And definitely the experience of meeting these people, of interviewing people, was very profound. And I feel like there could have been at least 5 different films coming out of this experience. And also just the oil spill, like the whole idea sparked from this incredible movement of solidarity that was just national wide. And I think I'd never, ever experienced that. And I think just this solidarity where I think in crisis this happens, like just for a spark of moment, you have this moment of utopia, or where all boundaries between people just vanish for like 2 days, like it just doesn't matter anymore. And that was just so beautiful that I really felt like this is what need to be captured. I think then when I started the film, like animation, I'm an artist, it was actually a very lonely process because you're sitting alone at your desk with your drawing and you film for like a very long time. It was initially an art commission. So I feel like then I started editing, and you're basically alone with all these voices for a very long period until I realized that I actually needed, I'm not a filmmaker initially, like a production, company. And which then slowly kind of feel like it was like a team building up until we managed actually to make the film in Mauritius. So, like it was like slowly you start to build in a team after like 2 years of struggling alone with your story. And that was really precious. And definitely, again, because I work alone in my studio a lot, like we worked on this film for like, I think for 4 months approximately. We were like a team of 5 girls, all from Mauritius or La Réunion Island. And that experience to work in a team for me was really enriching, but also a learning curve because I'm not that used to it. So directing a film, working with a team is incredible. It just presents new challenges because you're also learning how to communicate your ideas, like how, and the musicians, and all these jobs as well in the film industry that I discovered on the way, because I basically learned how you make a film while making it. So, you also just don't really understand at start, like not the hierarchies, but the roles, what does a producer do? What does a sound editor do? How does these interactions basically, and how you communicate ideas. I think that was very, very enriching. And same now, I think now that the film is out, it's definitely for me a very precious experience to have a team just like, the producers, the distributors, who make sure that the film is seen by people, which alone you can't manage. And at the same time, I travel alone a lot of the time. So it's this paradox again of like being in crowds and being in a team. And so, yeah, I think definitely like super enriching, even from a personal point of view, through all these interactions and all the people I met, and keep meeting actually through the process of now showing the film to, and also reaching new audiences, because the film was more like an adult film in my mind, because it has a lot of very adult themes, but it's reaching a lot of young audiences. So it's making me meet a lot of like school kids and children and teachers, which is amazing. And it's just so surprising that it finds just also like path and people where it's just meant to be, and that's really incredible. Yeah.
It's such a deeply moving film, and I feel bad that not everybody in the here has seen it, but yeah, just this sort of even sort of the community, but then the sort of spiritual side of it, of this, the impact of this sort of ecological disaster. It was a really stunning film. And I think of Chen's film as sort of a sibling to that, because it's the other environmental film in this SLEX program, also animated, but also sort of talks about communal effort as a way to address climate change, climate disaster. So Chen, do you want to talk about collaborations on your film?
Sure.
Can I just on one note? Sorry, it just sparked me when because it just to finish on that, because I think what I really learned, you talked about the spiritual part of in the process of making this film and of asking questions about us in the world, and I think it resonates with all the films that we're talking about, is that the other is us, and that we're always just like a mirror of the others around, and that these boundaries between us and the world is an illusion. And yeah, I feel like that's what the film teaches me, basically, that we are the others and the others are us. So yeah, I just want to end on that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Chen.
Yeah. Thanks. I think that my film it makes sense as also an extension of that idea of finding out who we are in the world. And thanks for pointing out the connection to collective organizing and community. That's that that that's where my film ends up on. So my film was a student film, and I made it during the third year of my bachelor's degree in the film program, and it was kind of a bit of a crazy idea at the time, because I didn't have any experience in animation at all, and I went into this pretty much with this other animator I found who also had similar feelings about the environment, and it was also more or less his first animated film, and he only made like a really short, like 1 minute stop motion and thing in his backyard for his partner's birthday, right? It was just like this tiny experimental thing, and but I knew his art was good. So his name was Rowan McCulloch O'Rourke. Um, and together we sort of envisioned this stop motion mixed media collage of a movie. But none of us really knew what the film was gonna look like at the end. Kind of figured it out as we went along, and as the animation is based on a documentary recording of a Zoom interview with this psychotherapist. So we didn't know how exactly the story was gonna go either to a certain point in the film, and we only had 3 months to do it because it was a student film, and you had to get it done by the end of the semester. So it was a really interesting production. Anderson and Todd, the psychotherapist, was also a really interesting kind of person. When I was when I was deep in my climate anxiety nightmare phase, I went to this subreddit called Collapse a lot, and that subreddit is an online community of people who are basically convinced that the path we're on, um, there, there's kind of no turning back now from some of the major consequences of climate change and these other problems that we've made for ourselves. And it is going to end in a collapse of the world as we know it, probably sooner rather than later. And it was in this community that I was looking for people to talk to me about like how to find hope in the world. So maybe I looked in the wrong place, but Anderson Todd turned out to be this guy who contacted me out of the blue. He, like I said, he's a psychotherapist and he's also an educator. So he's really on the front lines of this developing climate anxiety issue, but he's also an educator, so he's also really good at talking for a really long time and making it really compelling. So it went so well that I like our collaboration so much that we are working on a second film, actually, a second animated short film with him, also on the same topic. So as a student film, it was kind of ambitious in that I was trying to kind of make the film a little bit bigger than than maybe I should have. In the film, there's a lot of these photographs of communities coming together after disaster, and that's our part of our pivot from scary climate images to here's where we can find hope in the movie. And in those images, I didn't just want to take generic photographs of like, here are some people moving some rocks, right? I wanted to get photographs that had a story behind it of communities spontaneously coming together after something bad had happened. And that turned out to be a lot harder than I expected, right? Because when you look at when you look for disaster relief photographs, often it's governments coming into it's photographs of governments and organizations coming into for disaster relief, and I didn't really want to tell that story. I wanted to tell the story of communities sort of like finding power in communities and communities existing on their own outside of government intervention, not relying on Big Brother to always come and help you out. And that took a long time because I had to get in touch with all these people, and I didn't. The other thing, I also didn't want it to be like UN and white people, rich wealthy stuff helping the poor people. I feel like that there was a lot of those sort of images. I wanted to see people helping themselves. So I was looking in photos I tried to look at photos not just from like like the English speaking countries that we're all used to. I got a lot of American photos, but I was also really trying to deliberately source photos from the Philippines, from Japan, from all these places that we kind of maybe you see in the news for a short while and then we kind of forget about them. So I mean, I feel like when talking about community, I also should talk about my distribution strategy. Building off what Steve mentioned, I've been very like personally involved in my distribution strategy, and my film has played like more than 100 places, and that all comes down to really like a couple festivals and a few individuals who really believe in the film and sort of expanded the reach of my film massively. And I think that's really sort of opened my eyes to how many people want to talk about this issue. And it's changed my mind on how isolated I felt at the beginning of this journey.
Yeah, I really love that the film ends on these photographs of mutual aid, of people supporting each other, and that you attributed each one of them, not only the sort of Creative Commons, but also like where this photo was from, right? And I think it's a really beautiful sort of ending to your film and a really beautiful way to sort of deal with climate grief. So thank you. That was the first film I saw, and it was exactly what I was looking for in this festival. It's not about, I'm not interested in people talking about voting and, calling your senators and waiting for, government aid. I wanted to show people supporting each other, community. And so, yeah, thank you for the film. Lipa, I feel like your film it's not obvious where the community is in the film because it's very much you're the voice in the film, you're the person in the film, it's your story entirely. So where were the collaborations on your film?
Yeah, no, it's been really interesting hearing everyone's processes, and in my case, it was more of a solitary process. And I was commissioned by Scottish Documentary Institute, so I had the support of the team there, and we'd have workshops throughout the weeks prior to making the film, talking about different things and exploring everyone's film's themes. I personally found the creative part of my film so hard. It took so long for me to try and figure out how to do it. Because how do you show Alice in Wonderland? In my head, it all makes sense, but how do you show it visually on the screen? And I find that really, really difficult. And eventually what happened was, and sorry, also alongside that, I find it emotionally really difficult to do the film because it's quite heavy subject matter in terms of like race and religion, etc. At the same time, the war on Gaza had started. So it was really difficult seeing the images, and we still continue to see it today, and then trying to write a script and make the film. I just emotionally was really, really finding it difficult. And eventually, as the time went on, I found an animator who's a good friend of mine, Wilma Smith, who does paper-based animation, and it's not sort of your traditional 2D animation. It's a very physical animation type. And given how Alice in Wonderland is, the sort of physicality, such a sensory overload, that the condition itself, that the animation was really helpful in bringing that physical element out of Alice in Wonderland. And I wrote the script. At one point I was just forced to write the script because, I had delayed it and delayed it and delayed it because I just couldn't get myself down to write it. And when I did write it, I felt like I just puked out all the words. It was just one afternoon. I remember it was a Friday, and all the frustration, all the anger, all the emotional baggage, I think, of the last few months just came out. And I remember just writing a really raw, script, which then, had different iterations and edits to it. But I'm glad it did, because then it formed the film. And in terms of collaborators, my animator, we worked in her little shed in the back of her garden, and it was quite a funny experience, but it was really great physically just being there with her. A producer, Josephine Bag, who was amazing. She was really great in terms of being that creative outlet, and then we would go back and forth. And then a part of the film, I'm in the film, but I'm not really physically, like, you can't really see my face purposely, because I just would not like to be in front of the camera. And I needed to sort of, my presence kind of needed to be physically in it as sort of a character representation of someone experiencing Alice in Wonderland. And we had a DOP and the gaffer that came, and it was a really small crew. It was in Glasgow over the weekend, and we just shot different, like, distorted footage of my body, my hands, all that kind of stuff. We used really peculiar lens, and all those things fed into it. And then we worked with a sound designer who worked, because I narrated the film as well, so I'm very omnipresent in the film. And we recorded my voice, the narration, and that went over the film, and the soundscape as well. And then the editor as well, Grace King, who's incredible. She really was able to bring out the film, because it goes from live motion to then animation. And I was really worried, actually, doing animation, that it would look quite gimmicky, and I would just, it wouldn't look good. But actually it worked really well, just because all the different elements worked. So it was a very intimate collaboration process. But it was really wonderful to have, as Kim, you said, all the different interactions with different people, and everyone brought their own perspective to the film, despite it being quite a personal issue. I really welcomed everyone's thoughts and ideas on it. And then the film has been interesting because it's quite confrontational, as in the subject matter. And whenever I show it in screenings, I'm always like really worried that someone's going to come up to me and be like, "What was that?" But actually, the reaction has been really wonderful. And so many people actually afterwards have come up to me and say, "You know what? When you were talking about Alice in Wonderland, you know, my mom's got that as well, and actually it come, you know, in these conversations it's come through that. So, and I don't think actually Alice in Wonderland syndrome has ever really been depicted like the way we've done it, which has been really quite interesting. And yeah, the conversations about race, religion, you know, is quite front and center in the film, and it's been interesting showing it to an audience that particularly maybe not from the same background as me, but can also appreciate what the film is trying to say. So yeah, it was a small collaboration, but I mean, everyone had a huge stake in making it, and it wasn't just me. And I think that's always the beautiful part of filmmaking, is that there's everyone involved in it.
I should just say that when we had the screening at the Brattle, two of the women on the panel, that was I asked them to, you know, what film sort of resonated with you, and it was your film and the depiction of, you know, the sort of the rage and the being able to express the rage, and not really seeing that a lot on film. And so so yeah, that definitely, you know, your film connected with folks, you know, who got to see it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
So Maliana, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your film and the collaboration and this community that you're, you know, whose story you're sharing.
So this film was quite intimate, because really it started off being a collection of home movies. So I was just living in this community, filming day-to-day kind of things. And then kind of like Chen, I suddenly realized I had to make a film for my master's final. And so evolved these short movies and home movies into a actual documentary. So most of the B-roll was filmed beforehand, and then I just went and spoke to the concrete collaborators. So really the whole of the film was basically the collaborators, me and Juan Isla, sound designer, who joined at the very end for sound. The characters' subjects. The first one is Zazu, who is actually my sister. So her representation is almost autobiographical, because we both were brought up in a very small village, rural settings, single mum working. And so we both resorted to squatting as a way of furthering our education and being able to move to a big city and study. Then Carlos, who's the other collaborator or person, is a close friend of mine, who he and his partner AG carry a lot of the musical part of this film. So they are both in a band together. They managed to be musicians through squatting, and because it's what they've got. And so practicing recording them in their band gave the musical aspect to the film. And then the final collaborator is Lily, who is also a close friend of mine, who's a trans girl, who I felt her was very important, because right now, the way trans people are being treated in the world is absolutely horrendous. And although people arrive in the squat scene in lots of different ways, there is a noticeable amount of trans people in the squatting scene, because the way they're being excluded from society is making a lot of people homeless and a lot of people not be able to fit into society. And yeah, I'd say that covers everyone.
Well, so I know we've gone a little long here. I don't know if folks can stick around for another like few minutes, just for you all to have a sort of last word. Is that all right? Okay, I know Tatiana had to leave. But yeah, so we'll just go around, pass it around, and just anything you want to say about, you know, the impact that you hope that the film will have. And so I will start with Sonia.
So we made this film to educate. Our lead character, Danielle Scott, is actually an educator, a teacher, and that has been the mission of her art, especially with all the banning of history in the US and book bannings. That was really her motivation to kind of get out of her comfort zone and tackle more challenging subject matters. And that was how we connected as well, that her art is so deeply historical, political, and yeah, and we made this film to, share it widely into the world and to trigger a discussion about history and ancestry. So that's what we are hoping to reach people and have them discuss and share their own stories.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about this, how there is a huge movement to erase this history right now, the history of slavery, and so, I feel like this film is, Danielle's work seems like an art of resistance. Your film is is part of that resistance, and
your festival.
yes, that's the hope. That's the hope. Susan. Just anything you want to say about impact for both the films?
So for Resist, the Resistance Revival Chorus, our hope with that film was to spark a global movement of resistance revival chorus chapters and really empower people to use their voices for enacting change. And I have to say, I think that we accomplished it, because there have been at least 10 different chapters that have emerged after this film was made. And 2 more countries added to the list that have resistance revival choruses. So I think that's still our goal, is to really spread this, where there's a resistance revival chorus in every city in America, especially the cities that need it the most, that need these little pockets of community with like-minded people that they feel like they are making a difference in the world. And then when it comes to When We Arrive as Flowers, I'm actually about to hop on a call with, we're developing it into an art installation. And so we have a meeting with the museum to turn it into an interactive installation piece, where we would also incorporate other trans poets to offer their own poetry and their own stories to include as part of this exhibit, and to really protect the beauty of the trans experience, because, as was said earlier, trans lives are under attack. And it's really important to create these safe spaces and show the beauty of who these individuals are, and to protect their autonomy and to celebrate it and show the joy and show the absolute gorgeousness that is the trans experience. And so that's our goal.
And Lipa, do you want to talk about the impact for your film?
Yeah, I think for me is providing a visual for people to see what Alice in Wonderland syndrome is, and it to also provoke questions as well about bias, about who has the right of, defense, violence, and all those questions, I think, are provoked within the film in a very sensory way. Impact, I struggle with that question, because I'm still quite unsure myself, and it's only sometimes when I go to festivals and I see actually the audience reaction, I realize, oh, this is the impact, because they come with really interesting questions. But yeah, I hope that my film is able to sort of showcase Alice in Wonderland, because for me, just to mention really quickly, I only found out what Alice in Wonderland was when I was in my 20s. I experienced it for my entire childhood and early teens, and I didn't know what it was until I was in my early 20s, and I had to Google it because it was such a strange experience I would go through. So for me, it's been a really full circle moment, actually, not only having not known what it was, throughout my childhood, but now having made a film about it, it feels pretty special. So I hope people can experience that as well as they watch it. Thank you. I can pass it to Steve.
Yeah, I really think cinema has something to offer this moment. You know, and it's like not just in the way of like these sort of like newer historical perspectives, but really like remind us of these alternative visions of the world that we can embrace and we can actively seek out. I think like a lot about cinema and its power just, you know, to imagine also like new and different social and political arrangements where we find this and understand unseen power, and how do we tap into that? How do we leverage that? You know, working with the organizers of the Amazon Labor Union, you know, who were workers with no organizing experience prior, was such a eye-opening experience just in terms of like they kind of like reminding me and our team that like, you know, documentary really has this uncanny ability to reveal these contradictions in the world, right? That like, you know, like we think a lot about, I think, the oppressive structures of power that tamp down, you know, so many kinds of diverse human experiences. But also there are so many, you know, beautiful and inspiring and small scale systems of resistance that are bubbling up everywhere. And that to sort of like to train your eye, you know, and our cameras on these small movements and moments is really moving. It's really powerful. I mean, like there's nothing that these horrible corporations and bosses are more scared of than people coming together and organizing. You know, like at it at its inception, the Amazon Labor Union was just like 5 people for a very long time. That 5 people could scare $1 trillion company is like moving to me. And you know, and then on the other end of that is like they're nothing that scares these people in great positions of power than like collective action that lead to bigger things like strikes and, you know, work shutdowns and things like that. And so um you know, I guess I just I think it's a really exciting moment to think of and be reminded of documentary as this way that we can continuously be reminded to think fluidly about like who do we collaborate with? Like what are meaningful collaborations? Like what do they look like? And um, what are moments of meaningful collaboration that the world hasn't really seen much of yet? Um, and I think that that's a really exciting kind of like reminder of like, you know, even like a 3 minute like film about a conversation um, could really like reach somebody you never imagined, you know, on the other side of the world. So I like, yeah, I am grateful for the chance to share this work with you all and be in conversation.
Thank you. And you said something about small scale resistance, and it makes me think of Moliana's film and the squatters as sort of living this sort of small scale resistance. So, is there anything that you want to say about the impact that you hope the film will have?
So on one side, I feel like it's a portrait of a time capsule in a way that it's showing a moment in a time of a community. But on a greater scale, I would like it to open questions both about the housing crisis and also different perspectives from different genders, different areas of society. And yeah, same as lots of your films, highlight the importance of community in this world right now. We're ever more aiming for separatist visions. So making community is the highest form of rebellion. It's the most immediate and tiny and forceful form of rebellion that we can do.
Excellent. Chen.
Hi. I saw this statistic a while back that in Canada, 8 in 10 young people are worried about climate change. But then in that same study, they also found that half of those people who are worried about climate change don't talk about it. So and the statistics for that age group are similar for in the US, UK, and Australia as well. And I don't know that I want to. I don't know if we should. I feel like some degree of anxiety around climate change is warranted because it's so serious. But I think there's value in getting people to normalize those feelings and talk to each other about it more. So I'm really hoping to move that second number up is where I would place sort of my impact goal in numerical terms. But essentially it comes down to trying to get people who have trouble processing their feelings or talking to other people about climate emotions to really sort of hook into this larger community that they might not know about, or hook into their existing community and sort of normalize those conversations so that they are more resilient and prepared for hardship, not just climate hardship, but just everything, I think. I think it's it's hard for me to really sort of talk about this stuff by myself. And I think I want this film to be in the hands of organizations and schools that can use this film, that sort of frame this film for specifically for the communities and for their specific issues. I was also reading how in at least in Canada, climate education, they don't often cover the emotional dimension of climate change. They teach you the science, but they don't teach you how to feel about it. And often who ends up doing that work is nonprofit organizations. It's organizations outside of the schools. And so far this film has been used in like classes about community psychology. It's been after it played in Miami right after Hurricane Milton. So I think those are good applications of my film being used, and I really hope that it continues.
Yeah, that's an excellent goal. I think that again, when I talk about, that was the first film I saw, and for me, it sort of embodied this idea of community and collaboration and addressing problems together as a way, as an antidote to despair, right? That the film goes from despair into, what do you do? What do you do with that despair? How do you move towards action? So Kim, you get the last word.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, first I want to say thanks to everyone on the panel because it's really insightful hearing everyone's stories, and it really makes, I don't know, I feel very grateful for all the sharing and the community that this is building. I think there are two aspects. I think the first purpose of the film was, and that's ties down to the power of cinema, which is to hold memory. Because I really wanted to capture the emotions that the bliss of community in the midst of horror on one sense, and also act as a reminder of what people felt in that moment. And also the film back then was made in a very difficult political context because obviously the government, which we cut elections in the meantime, so we changed government, thank God. But in the time I made the film, the political context was very tense because this oil spill led to very big protests, and it was tied in so much. It highlighted so much dysfunction in society, but in Mauritius, but also in the world, because obviously, this oil tanker comes from abroad and is tied in wider networks, which the oil spill highlighted. And I think one of the aims of the film in terms of impact, and I got reminded of it recently at a screening, was for people not to forget. To people to remind what happened, to remind themselves what happened, why it happened, how it happened, and how people confronted it together. And because people forget so quickly, it's only been 5 years, but people have been saying that to me. Like the film was there to make people relive some of the emotion of what happened, which I think were very important emotion because they kind of teach us something. I think that's why we write stories and we want to remember certain things. And the other impact is, as I said, like again, thanks to the team with me, is how the film found his path to where I think deep down I wanted it to go without speaking it out, because recently we organized screenings in technical ocean schools, normal schools, NGOs, with a marine protection NGO, which as an introduction of the film talks about, you know, like whales and turtles and plastic, and how it's, you know, like the impact it has on us and us on them, and just us in general. And I really felt in this moment where I'm in the classroom with these marine scientists in front of, like, I don't know, for instance, students who are going to work in marine schools, you know, because they're going to work on boats and which are basically, in this particular case, like people who got out of school, but they're all like coastal villager kids, you know, who maybe dropped out of school and are in this technical school, or just in general, any school. But I was really like, okay, this is actually why I made this film, you know, because I want people to learn about the ocean, to talk about these topics. And I think this is really deep down why I made this film. So yeah, that's been amazing, actually, to see the film really going into this direction and serving this purpose of talking about more than just what happened, but everything around it, basically. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for, I don't know why I thought this conversation was going to be a half hour. Of course, it wasn't going to be a half hour. And I wanted to hear everything that you all had to say, because I've been living with these films now for a few months, and I'm in love with them all, and I'm so excited to share them with more folks. And I wanted you all to have an opportunity to share with the audience about making them an impact. And so thank you all for being here. And we'll edit something together from this, and I'll share it with you all and make sure that you all get to see each other's films as well. So thank you all so much for believing in this strange experiment of a film festival. But hopefully, you know, we start getting it out there and start getting people together and moving from despair to action. So thank you all, and I will be in touch with you all soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. It's lovely to meet you all.
Same.